3 decades have passed, yet the name the Jar Murderer still sends shivers down the spines of Hong Kong's people. A young taxi driver, seemingly ordinary, turned into a bloodthirsty monster. He murdered at least 4 innocent women and preserved their body parts in glass jars as if collecting a grotesque trophy. This was not only Hong Kong's first known serial murder case, but also a nightmare that has haunted the city ever since. The horror was so overwhelming that all female forensic staff and police officers were excluded from the case for fear of the trauma it could cause. Behind the mask of Hong Kong's first serial killer stood Lam Kor Wan, now 67 years old, serving life in Shek Peak, the city's maximum security prison on Lantau Island. Back in 1982, when he was just 27, Lam was arrested after police uncovered one of the most gruesome crimes the city had ever seen. Lam's story began far away in Malaysia, where he was born into a violent household. His father, known for his brutal temper, often beat his wife and children. On one occasion, he struck young Lam so viciously that the boy lost consciousness. When the family later moved to Hong Kong, the father's violence subsided. But the scars on Lam's psyche never healed. Growing up, Lam became withdrawn, quiet, and socially isolated. At school, he struggled to make friends, retreating instead into video games and solitary hobbies. By the late 1970s, still a teenager, Lam had developed a secret obsession. He began ordering pornographic magazines from the UK and hiding them inside a locked metal chest, too ashamed to let anyone, including his own family, know. His brother, who shared the same room, never suspected a thing. Lam would only unlock the chest and indulge his secret life when the house was empty. This double existence, hidden in plain sight, was the first glimpse of the darkness to come. As the years went by, Lam grew restless. The magazines that once consumed him no longer satisfied his urges. They felt too ordinary, too generic. At 18, he bought a Polaroid camera, determined to create images of his own. What followed was a chilling escalation. Lam began sneaking into public restrooms, secretly photographing women in their most private moments. It didn't take long before he was caught and chased away, but Lam's compulsions only grew darker. One night, he pulled a knife on a young woman near a restroom, demanding she pose for obscene photos. The attempt failed. Police arrested him and brought him in. A psychiatrist diagnosed him with mental illness, sparing Lam from criminal punishment. Instead, he was committed to Castle Peak Hospital, Hong Kong's psychiatric facility. After just 3 months, Lam was released, free to start over. What no one realized was that his darkest chapter had only just begun. As he entered adulthood, Lam Kor Wan worked as a taxi driver, preferring the night shift, a job that suited his quiet, solitary nature. He still lived with his family, sharing a cramped room with his younger brother in To Kwa Wan. By the age of 27, Lam had never dated. Instead, he immersed himself in video games and chess, relishing the feeling of absolute control on the board, something he lacked in real life. Photography became another obsession. Self-taught and eager to perfect his skills, Lam mingled with professional circles, honing a craft that would later serve a far darker purpose. The first murder happened in the early hours of February 3, 1982. Around 4 a.m., Lam picked up a young woman, 21-year-old Chan Fung Lan, a nightclub worker, outside Tsim Sha Tsui. She was heavily intoxicated after a night of drinking with colleagues. During the ride, Chan repeatedly changed her mind, first asking Lam to stop so she could vomit, then demanding to turn back to the nightclub, only to switch directions again. Agitated and losing patience, Lam drove to a deserted area. There, In a sudden outburst, he looped an electrical cord around her neck and strangled her until she stopped breathing. He took the body back to his family's apartment and hid it beneath the sofa. Later, when the house was empty, Lam dragged the corpse out, arranged lighting, and began photographing it. Driven by his twisted desires, Lam bought a saw to dismember the body, capturing each stage with his camera. He then sealed the remains in plastic bags and dumped them near the Shingmun River. A week later, police recovered the dismembered remains, but with no way to identify the victim, the trail went cold, allowing Hong Kong's first serial killer to continue undetected. After the impulsive frenzy of his first killing, Lam Kor Wan began to refine his methods. No longer content with chance, he meticulously prepared for the next crime. He purchased surgical instruments, bottles, jars, and formaldehyde solution, tools that transformed his room in To Kwa Wan into something closer to a morgue than a bedroom. His second victim was another young woman working at a bar. Like before, he strangled her, brought the body home, and documented the entire process with his camera. By the time he killed his third victim, also a bar worker, Lam showed no hesitation. Each murder fed his compulsion, and the camera became an accomplice, capturing every stage of mutilation. The fourth victim marked a chilling escalation. Her name was Leong Wai Sung, a 17-year-old student. On a Friday night around 9:30 p.m., Leong chose to head home rather than stay out with friends. She hailed Lam's taxi, unaware she had just entered a predator's trap. For hours, Lam kept her locked inside with handcuffs, speaking calmly about religion, family, and the meaning of life, as if stalling the inevitable. By 4 a.m., when the girl fell asleep from exhaustion, Lam silently strangled her. The body was once again taken back to his family apartment. During one of his photo sessions, a lamp accidentally fell onto Leong's leg, leaving a burn mark. This small but crucial detail would later help forensic experts identify the killer. Meanwhile, panic gripped Hong Kong. Police were discovering dismembered remains of women scattered in plastic bags across the city. The method was always the same: body parts cut with precision, wrapped and discarded, signatures of a calculating mind. At home, Lam preserved some body parts in jars filled with formaldehyde, cataloging them like specimens, grim trophies of his compulsion. Despite his morbid obsession with photography, Lam Kor Wan had no darkroom of his own, as he shared a room with his younger brother. So after finishing each roll of film, he quietly took it to a photo shop for development. At first, when the developer saw strange photos, close-up shots of human bodies, he grew suspicious. But Lam cleverly explained that he was an assistant in a medical laboratory at a university, and that the photos were merely for research and teaching purposes. That quick lie allowed him to escape suspicion, until Lam brought in his final roll of film, the one containing images of 17-year-old student Long Wai Sum. The photo developer was horrified to see a large burn mark on the victim's thigh, along with other images showing her chest severed. These were no longer research photos. Terrified, he immediately called the police. On August 18, 1982, Lam Kor Wan came to the shop to collect his film as usual. But instead of receiving his photos, he was handcuffed on the spot. At first, Lam stubbornly claimed the roll of film belonged to an unknown customer who had left it behind. He denied knowing any of the women in the photographs. However, when police raided his home in To Kwa Wan, a horrifying truth was revealed. In the small room he shared with his brother, police discovered glass jars filled with formaldehyde hidden under the bed. Inside were not lab samples, but severed female genital organs. DNA tests confirmed these were body parts from previously murdered women. When searching further, police found a locked metal box containing hundreds of photographs Lam had taken himself. Among them, investigators identified at least 15 different women. Yet, to this day, only 4 victims have been confirmed. The fate of the remaining women remains a terrifying unsolved mystery. With his perverse lust, sexual obsession, and grotesque habit of preserving body parts in jars, Lam Kor Wan became one of the most depraved killers in Hong Kong's history. He became infamously known by the chilling nickname, the Jar Murderer. On April 3, 1983, Lam Kor Wan officially stood trial. The trial drew immense public attention, and the jury consisted of 7 men, as all women were excluded to avoid psychological trauma from the gruesome details of the case. At the end of the trial, Lam was sentenced to death by hanging for 4 counts of murder. However, on August 29th of the same year, the sentence was reduced to life imprisonment without parole. The fear and horror of Lam's monstrous crimes weighed heavily on his own family. None of them could live in peace inside the house filled with memories of dismembered bodies. Beneath the sofa, across the floor, everywhere bore traces of victims. The family decided to put the house up for sale in hopes of moving elsewhere. But the story of the Jar Murderer was so infamous that no one dared step into the so-called House of the Devil. Helpless against society's rejection and due to financial struggles, they were forced to keep living in that haunted home. At the apartment's entrance, the family hung a painting of Zhong Kui, the demon queller in Chinese mythology, as a desperate attempt to ward off the ghosts of the past and the restless spirits.